Hello and welcome to our 2025 prediction series. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I am the practice lead for the AppDev practice at theCUBE Research. I'm joined today by Rob Strechay. Rob, want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good to be on with you again, Paul. I mean, we've done this a bunch, but not here. So I'm excited to have you on board, managing director for the Cube Research, and I also cover cloud observability and infrastructure. But today, really focused on the cloud aspect and cloud infrastructure aspect of things, and how it ties in with what you're up to with AppDev. So very excited to be joining you.
Absolutely, Rob. And it is really excited to be on with you talking about this. It is a hot topic, right? And when we talk about cloud, we talk about cloud native adoption, across the app dev practice, as it really does impact that past, present, future state of application modernization and application development. When I look at the predictions for 2025, and there are a number here, right, that we're looking at, and especially the impact to the application development world is I would say quite substantial. There's a lot of new tech stacks that are coming in. There's a lot of new evolutions of products that are in space. But like one of the big areas, and of course we have to jump right into it with AI, right? AI augmentation and development initiatives are really starting to kind of take off. And looking at this in the concept of organizations are looking to scale, right? What we see is 50% of organizations are looking to augment their developer pool using AI. But I predict, based on our data, that those organizations will fail because there really still needs to be a human in the loop. And when we look at the cloud aspect, Rob, we look at it from the cloud native perspective. I know automation is a factor. I know AI is a big factor, and scale is clearly a factor. What are your thoughts on the impacts of application monetization and that cloud native space?
Yeah, I think you're dead on with how often it's going to fail. I think again, when you start to look at app modernization, you have things like Q for Developer at Amazon, where the hyperscalers are getting into this. You also have Microsoft with GitHub and others, and going down the Copilot route to help modernize different code. Even Q Developer looking at older code from the mainframe and bringing it into a Java framework or into a Node.js type framework. When you start to look at how these hyperscalers in cloud, they're trying to make old new again. But like you said, you can't get the human out of the loop on this. A lot of the developers that I even talk to that are trying to get applications to the cloud, what they say is that it's a great first pass and it helps them get some things together, but then they have to go in and do a lot of cleanup. And sometimes they're looking at it and saying, the AI is just not getting them far enough down the path where it almost would be easier if they had written some of this themselves, because they end up rewriting large chunks of the code anyways. And I think to really take advantage of things like serverless and some of the other infrastructure pieces that are out there, really it needs to be very efficiently built API driven code that takes advantage of those pieces of the infrastructure. So I think you're dead on that AI is a big thing for cloud, not only in the app dev space, but obviously they're doing foundation models, they're bringing the infrastructure, the GPUs, and trying to build up all of the services, so their PaaS, their platform as a service layers, as well as their IaaS layers, to support all of these new modern applications that hopefully are driven by the AI that they're actually building. So I think you're dead on with the 50% and a lot of failure. Probably I'd say, my guess is that 50% of the 50% are going to fail. So we'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and I like how we isolate it down to 50 to 50%. That's interesting. But I think that there's this desire to kind of piggyback on what you were saying. There's a desire to use AI-powered tools to help increase the assist developers with automating those repetitive tasks like code generation, debugging, testing. And like these systems really need to catch up with complex problem solving. So the innovation and collaboration really does require that human kind of in the loop piece as well. I think that there's definitely paths, basically 100 ways to get to the same destination. But like, I think that modernization play will incorporate some old and new. So there remains to be seen. I think that there's definitely an area that is going to grow here. But I also think it leads into our next prediction, Rob. When we look at the DevOps tooling and the platforms, right? We see what I'm seeing in our research here is, by the end of 2025, 50% of organizations are going to basically abandon managing individual best of breed DevOps tools in favor of a unified platform. Really, with the kind of the desire here is to reduce the operational complexity, streamlining those workflows, and really help improve integration, allowing organizations to accelerate application delivery cycles really without increasing that overhead, right? And I think that that's a big factor when we look at operational efficiencies and DevOps tooling. Definitely in the cloud factors, when you start taking the different cloud hyperscalers into consideration, unifying an approach can be complex, but also can be beneficial. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, part of this is also driven by AI and people looking to really get more out of AI, which, really takes your data and doing your fine tuning and tuning of those models that are being used under the hood in a secure way. And I think that cloud is really aimed at providing people those secure spaces to build their DevOps repositories, I guess you could say, so that they can go and have secure code management, that can then train the AI to be able to code in the, basically with the guardrails that they're looking to have, as well as having all of these different pieces that come together. I think from a DevOps platform perspective, yes, I think that as you and I have seen in a lot of these different places, people are looking for kind of one throat to choke and one place to go. I think the problem that you're getting into is that so many people are raised in different ecosystems at university now. So as they bring people in from university, a lot of times they're bringing the DevOps types of platforms that they've learned on at those universities with them, be it a Microsoft, a Google, or an Amazon type of platform. They're bringing that DevOps experience with them, and then they're trying to understand, okay, how do I do X, Y, and Z in the platform of choice of the company that hired me? And it's starting to, look at where you get some fractioning of that, or fractures in those platforms, where people are like, oh, well, I couldn't do this, but I used to be able to do this. And so I think it's going to be an interesting year for DevOps platforms and how they tie into the different clouds. I think some clouds have been more open with their APIs and how you can get at things that have tied into these DevOps platforms. And I think, the whole CI/CD pipeline and how things go to production and how we have checks and balances, canaries, and different layers on top of that. And those best practices is, again, at Amazon, where it's, how do you architect it properly, and, how for best code deployment. Same thing with Microsoft, where they have their kind of blueprints for that, and same with Google. I think that DevOps platforms are really going to be tying into these best practices so that they can try to drive more people into there. I think the problem is they're trying to be Swiss Army knives in a lot of places. And I think there's also been consolidation within the market to a certain extent, which I think will continue in 2025. As people like Hashi and others get subsumed in, which is more the day one, day two types of operations versus the day zero type of DevOps platforms. So a lot going to be a lot of moving pieces this year, I think, to tie back to what you were saying.
Yeah, Rob, there's a lot there to kind of unpack, right? And when we kind of talk through that, it really does come down to, I would say, which is our third prediction, which is really about spotlighting productivity challenges. And like developers' time is really spent on non-coding activities. What we're seeing in our research is 24% of developers are spending their time on writing code, and the rest of their time is spent on designing, testing, debugging, and basically shareholder meetings and things that are really not helping with developing that code. But to your point, you were talking about hiring developers on the tool sets that they are comfortable with. And I think it comes down to how organizations will view productivity, and the consolidation of platforms will also align to if the organization is productive, right? And so I think the reality is that will drive organizations to adopt more automation. You mentioned Hashi. I think Ansible is in there as well, and other automation tools. But I think these tools in between automation and AI are going to be used for non-coding activities, right? And they're going to be basically shifting the balance back towards innovation and value creation for the developer, and less about the kind of, I'll almost say, administrative parts that the developer has to do. And I think that's a big factor. We'll see that in 2025, especially when we see, talking about the cloud perspective, we see 94% of organizations are using 2 or more clouds, 65% are using 4 or more clouds, and we also see 20% of organizations responded that application portability is critical, right? And across these multiple clouds, you have to have a unified approach. You have to have a unified way of delivering these applications across these different clouds, but also developers need to be able to produce and release code quickly. What we also see in our research is 24% of respondents in an 800 plus person respondent survey that we recently did indicated that they want to release code on an hourly basis, yet only 8% are able to do so. And I think by having that unified platform will increase that productivity, or I should say, overcome the productivity challenges that organizations are seeing. What are your thoughts around this in relation to like the multi-cloud, that different hyperscalers, not just to mention the big ones, but like even the smaller ones?
Yeah, and I would even say on-prem, right? So I think again, when you look at hybrid, I think again 2025 is going to be continuing, and I think it actually will accelerate the amount of hybrid cloud. And cloud again is an operating model, not a place per se. And I think that is going to be key to the developer experience, because those people who can have developer platforms that not only live in the cloud but also live on-prem within a cloud framework, and make it easy for organizations, because people are looking at it, and I think we even see it, like you said, it's about a 50-50 split for where people are putting their net new applications between on-prem and in the cloud, using the ETR research that we had access to from back in August. That split has stayed about that balance for the past 2 years here. And I think what we see is that these developer platforms that can be multi-location can also be driving a lot of that innovation. And a big piece of that has been AI. And because people are bringing AI to the data versus data to the AI necessarily, in some cases they are, but it becomes that how the fluidity of the infrastructure and where you can develop. So a lot of times they're developing, building training models, fine-tuning them, putting the guardrails on and governance, and then they're going out somewhere to a cloud or to another location in the far edge with that inference and a subset of that model or subset of the data where they can use exceptions back to, so using MOE, a mixture of experts type of infrastructure to, again, if they have to go to RAG and they have to go to something, they can punch out into the other part of the application. And I think this is really challenging developers to think differently about their architectures, because a lot of times it was, yeah, we'll use things like CDN or some of these other pieces to get out to the far reaches of our network. But really, when you're talking about things like inference and being able to be quick and responsive back to the customers with those AI built-in applications, and we think AI is not an application but part of an application, it's really going to stress a lot of these developers. And I think you go to the consolidation, like you said, with Hashi joining up with Ansible and Red Hat in IBM. You also have people like Morpheus getting bought by HPE, where now HPE has their full stack. And to the portability aspect of it, got my little Kubernetes shirt on, and again, Kubernetes and packaging things as containers. Definitely, I think Kubernetes is one in that space. I think the portability of that is still not 100%. When you're going between different platforms, it's not like just drag and drop it over and it's easy. There's still a lot of things going on, especially on the networking side. And we see that is things that people like Cisco and Aviatrix and a number of others that I'm sure Bob talked about in the predictions earlier on. Really, that's going to be a very interesting piece of this whole cloud AI inference and app dev and developer platforms going forward. So I think as things got simpler with AI, they got more complex. And I think that's going to drive a lot of 2025 is there, I think people want to, simplify, but I think it's just going to get more complex before it gets any better.
Yeah, I agree. I really love our conversations because we tend to cram like 3 hours of topics into like 20 minutes. It's crazy, but I do want to touch on a couple of things. I mean, there's so many ways, so many areas to kind of think about here. When we talked about the kind of the burst capacity, I agree with you. The on-prem piece is interesting to me because in a recent cloud native survey we ran, we were showing that burst capacity of developer modernization, application modernization, was to leverage the public and private clouds. We saw that 46 to 48% of respondents indicated that they're moving their development efforts to the public and private clouds, but and only 11% were developing their cloud native applications on-prem. But then we ran a prediction for 2 years out, and it surprised me because repatriation was definitely occurring. We were seeing that the on-prem number jumped from 11% to 33%. And that is interesting to me because it really said, in my mind, that organizations were trying to modernize their applications, but they're also trying to modernize their infrastructures to be more cloud-like. And by moving the application workload to a public or private cloud off-prem to the cloud's environment, and it gave the organization time to redesign their on-prem environment to be more cloud-like and have that ability to be portable of those applications across the public, private, and on-prem environment. So that's an interesting kind of perspective. Again, we can talk for hours on this, but I know that you have a lot of opinions there. But I do want to pivot over to the next kind of topic here, right? And the fourth prediction we're talking about is as we're moving data around and as we're building and modernizing applications, what we're seeing is security is a big impact, right? So secure DevOps will really become non-negotiable in 2025. As we see supply chains attacked and zero-day vulnerabilities are increasing, over 60% of organizations are planning to embed DevSecOps practices as a fundamental requirement. This will include automated vulnerability scanning, continuous compliance monitoring, as well as security training, embedding into the CI/CD pipeline to protect those applications and infrastructure. Now, this is interesting because the training element will apply to our next prediction, but I don't want to jump too far ahead. I want to give you a chance to respond on what that means from a cloud perspective, because I know that there's a lot of factors there.
Yeah, I think again, when you start to look at everything that's gone on with DevSecOps, and we've been talking about shift left for quite a while. I think it'll never fully get shifted left. I think platform engineering, which is something I should have probably brought up in the last comment, is really going to take off in 2025. I think it's going to be the year of platform engineering, and I think platform engineering and security, having security inside of platform engineering and having processes. So to your earlier point about what a low percentage, 8% or so, being able to get to hourly releases of code, I don't know that that's going to jump this year because I think there are so many problems, not only with securing the code, but the quality of code and things that can go bump in the night. We saw that with the mishap that happened with CrowdStrike over the course of the summer, which was really a DevOps related, not a security related issue. But when you start to look at these, how fast can we go? And you can really only go as fast as what you can secure and what you can focus on. And I know you talked to Jackie about this in episode 4, so call out to go back and look at that because she'll go way deeper on this stuff than I will. But when I look at the infrastructure pieces that have to be tied together, not only in the networking side where Bob would have talked about, in the actual operations side and being able to log it all and bring it all back, that Jackie would bring in. I think one of Jackie's philosophies, and I totally agree with, is that there's going to be a lot more regulation similar to what happens in financial services today around all of this, how the pipelines and how people go to market with their applications, because there's going to be a lot more penalties coming back, not just because of PII and GDPR and things of that nature, which we've hit a lot of headlines because they're big splashes when Facebook or somebody else or Meta in general has a leak, or one of the companies has a leak of PII. I think that really DevSecOps is one of those places that it's got to be everywhere, not just shift left. It has to be shift everywhere kind of concept. And there's got to be multiple gates to get through to ensure this. I do think this is a place that AI will definitely help in creating tests to those vulnerabilities, because we know that the bad guys are out there using AI to exploit the vulnerabilities. So going and checking for all of those is really, I think, a big piece of how DevSecOps will get better. Because again, as you know, talking to devs, they don't want to create crappy code that's insecure. That's not their goal out of the gate. They don't, to your other point, when they look at it, we had the same problem when I was at Amazon. 30% of the time of my dev team was spent on, redoing, day one stuff that we had to infrastructure. Another 30% was bug fixing. Only 30% of the time was really spent on innovative code and deployment of that. So I think, again, people want to get that percentage of innovative code up and figure out why there's so much, that 60% up top of the other stuff. So I totally agree with you, and think this is one where there's going to be a lot of movement this year in this space, especially with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other factors here, as you know, like my main focus is around AppDev and the SDLC and what's happening. The DevSecOps piece, I don't nearly go into as much depth as Jackie or even Christoph went into in those sessions that we went on. So that's a big factor to consider. But when we look at security, I was once told as an analyst that you have to slow down to go faster, right? And that's part of the factor of pushing code out the door. There's a balance that organizations need to understand. DevOps teams have a KPI, and their KPI is to get the code released and pushed out the door. They're going to push the code out the door, but there has to be an alignment of the different pipelines, whether it's the CI/CD pipeline, the observability pipeline for actionable insights, and the security pipeline all need to converge to have that faster, repeatable way of releasing code very rapidly. And that also is a fine line between slowing down and having very quality control on the code, but also to have a competitive, almost a competitive advantage to your competitive landscape. You want to make sure that your application is getting out the door either at the same time or around the time that you're not being left behind by your competition. And I think that also, Rob, that leads into the last and final prediction I want to talk about, which is a skill gap issue we're seeing. Of course, that's a big one. It's always been a big one. But what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing based on our research is low code and no code expansion will really transform roles, right? And what we're seeing is the adoption of low code and no code platforms will grow over 30%, empowering the citizen developers to take on those routine application tasks. This will allow the professional developer to focus on the things you were just talking about, which is governance and compliance and regulations, but also provide complex integration and advanced customization around their organizational goals, right? So that's an area I think that is really going to take off as one of our final predictions here to talk about. I definitely believe that the guardrails need to be in place, but you need to empower the lines of business in order to execute against those applications. How is the cloud going to help with this?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what's been nice is that clouds are usually very API driven, very similar to where things like SAP and other ERP systems, HRM systems, CRM systems like Salesforce and others have a ton of different APIs that can be accessed and modernized using RPA, robotic process automation, and with all these low code, no code platforms. Again, having talked to people like UiPath, OutSystems, Pegasystems, and I think you start to look at where they've been going, and for the past 2 years, they've really been bringing AI to the table into these platforms that can bring in a whole bunch of more knowledge of some of these APIs that are outside of kind of the periphery of where they've been focused over a number of years, because a lot of the RPA has been, hey, people like ServiceNow using their RPA portion of their platform to go and automate different business processes and things of that nature. And I think that's actually the key to this. And I think I'm dead serious in the fact that business processes are what drive agentic or AI agents in the future. And the companies that are really set up very well for this are people like those vendors, the UiPaths, the Pegas, the OutSystems, that have really, and even ServiceNow for that matter, have been really focused on that process automation type of things. And then you also have newcomers like Celonis, which was in the process mapping industry and really the industry leader out of Germany. Because when you're starting to build these really sophisticated applications and have those skill gaps, how do you understand what the business is doing in this process, and how do you turn that into code? I think that is a big challenge for almost every organization. And I think it's also back to our first point around, the failure of AI. It's really because it's a failure of understanding your processes. And I think these RPA vendors and those who are on the periphery that are doing the process mapping and process intelligence are going to be key, because then there's a whole metadata layer, there's the whole data layer, there's a whole how to federate all of these different catalogs, and this is all the stuff in the cloud that people are doing and some on-prem, that really bringing that all together with the processes so that you have the security and the guardrails and the governance is going to be insane this year. And I think that this year, the RPA vendors that really lean into the process orientation and bringing that to agentic technology are going to win. And I totally agree with that this is going to be big this year.
Yeah, Rob, absolutely. There's so much more to kind of talk through here with regards to, again, I look at applications in the past, present, and future. We didn't even touch on things like WebAssembly and WASM, and you talked a little bit about serverless, but I definitely think that there's a whole nother set of conversations we can have here. Rob, I really want to thank you for your time. Your insights are always great, and around the cloud, around the practice that we're doing here. I look forward to working with you in 2025 and getting out this research. It's going to be a great year for 2025 and AppDev and cloud. And I also want to thank the audience for watching our session today. There's a lot here to kind of consider. I know we just kind of rattled off a lot of interesting points. I hope they resonated with what you're thinking, but feel free to reach out to Rob and myself, and we're more than happy to continue the dialogue. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for watching our session.